Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're starting a brand new Let's Talk Lore series on the channel titled Sima Yi's Coup, where we will cover the events centered around the infamous Gaopingling incident, where Sima Yi took control of the Wei court following a military coup against his fellow co-regent, Cao Shuang. This singular event will reshape the history of the Three Kingdoms, as it will build the foundation to the usurpation of Wei by the Sima clan, as they will go on to form the Jin dynasty, who will ultimately end the Three Kingdoms period by reuniting China once again. And our story here will begin in episode 1 titled Co-Regents, with the early days of Cao Shuang and Sima Yi's co-regency, which picks up right where our previous series on the rise of Sima Yi left off. So if you're new to the channel and are curious about Sima Yi's life leading up to this point, definitely consider checking that series out. Now, to properly tell this story, we have to first properly introduce Cao Shuang, who, as the co-regent alongside Sima Yi, will become Sima Yi's main opponent in this political battle for the control of the Wei court following Emperor Cao Rui's death, as Cao Rui's heir and adopted son, Cao Fang, was only 8 years old at the time when he ascended the throne as the third emperor of Wei in 239. Now, we don't know Cao Shuang's exact birth year, but it's safe to assume he was in his 30s or at most early 40s in 239 when he first became co-regent. The eldest son of General Cao Zhen, Cao Shuang grew up as a member of the imperial family as he frequented the imperial palace during his youth. And it was during this time that he befriended Cao Rui, which is very important because despite his father's numerous military achievements, Cao Shuang would not get his first political assignment until the year 226, when Cao Rui first became emperor, as Cao Rui's father, Emperor Cao Pi, really disliked most of the second generation members of his court due to their vanity, hubris, and extravagant upbringings. But with Cao Pi's passing, Cao Rui would turn to many of the second generation members, especially those he had grown up with, such as Cao Shuang, who was immediately promoted to become one of the 8 imperial attendants before taking on the position of Chengmen Xiaowei, or the lieutenant captain of the city gates. Now, this was a very important position as it commanded all the gate guards in the capital, so it goes without saying that Cao Rui trusted Cao Shuang. But if this alone does not convince you, then Cao Shuang's next appointment under Cao Rui as Wu Wei Jiangjun, or the general of the martial guards, should tell you exactly how much Cao Rui trusted Cao Shuang. The general of the martial guards position was a position that was first created by Cao Cao back in 211, originally as the lieutenant of the martial guards. It was given to Xu Chu after Xu Chu had saved Cao Cao's life during Ma Chao's rebellion. The role of this position is to be the head of the elite bodyguard unit in charge of protecting Cao Cao's life. And following Cao Cao's death and Cao Pi's usurpation of the Han in 220, Cao Pi upgraded the position title from lieutenant to general and kept Xu Chu in this post as the general of the martial guards, who now becomes the head of the elite bodyguard unit in charge of protecting the emperor. And following Cao Pi's death and Cao Rui's ascension, Xu Chu was still alive and remained in this post until 227 when he would finally die of old age. So for the first time ever in Wei's entire history, the general of the martial guards post finally becomes open again, and Cao Rui would pick Cao Shuang to take on this position and be in charge of his own safety. So now you know that even in the early days of Cao Rui's reign, Cao Shuang was extremely trusted and thrived in this center of power. But precisely because Cao Shuang had always been in the center of power, he never really had any chance to gain actual military experience or make a name for himself. Just oppose this was Sima Yi, who was 61 years old at the time when he became co-regent with Cao Shuang. And not only was he old, he had been working for Cao Cao and then the Wei court for 31 years now. So his work experience is almost as long as Cao Shuang's age. With that experience comes not only wisdom, but also an interwoven web of connections with other members of the court, And it was exactly this connection and Sima Yi's own prestige earned from his military experience and success that made him the co-regent once again, even though this time, during Cao Rui's sudden downturn in health, Sima Yi was not even present in the capital, as he was still marching back from Liaodong, oblivious to all of this. Now, throughout Chinese history, whenever a young emperor ascends the throne and multiple co-regents are assigned, the goal is to have the co-regents balance each other out so that they can run the court and thus the country without any one faction dominating the court, and thus taking power away from the emperor who will one day come of age and assume his duty in full. However, there are two major problems with Cao Rui's choice in co-regents. First, his heir, Cao Fang, was only 8 years old at this time. This means that the co-regents will have to run the court and the country for at least 8 plus years before Cao Fang could even come of age, much less take over. And during this long period, the balancing act between the co-regents, which can be better summed up as a political battle for control of the courts, will likely result in winners and losers. So ideally, you would like to have more co-regents to extend this battle. But unfortunately, the second problem with Cao Rui's choice in co-regents is that he only picked two. This not only will cause a much more intense political battle, as it becomes a binary choice for the court, but also the result of this political battle will most likely be decided in a relatively short time frame, as once one side wins and other side loses, the battle will be over with only two parties involved. But at least initially, Cao Shuang and Sima Yi did coexist in harmony for a very brief period of time, as in the beginning, Cao Shuang and Sima Yi held the same positions of imperial attendants, holders of the Jia Huangyue, or the imperial golden ceremonial acts, which gave them full independence on military matters, and they shared joint control of the imperial secretariat and each commanded 3,000 troops within the capital. The only difference in their titles was that Cao Shuang was the Grand General and Sima Yi was the Grand Commandant, which were positions both assigned to them by Emperor Cao Rui. Now, the most powerful position that they held was the joint control of the Imperial Secretariat, or Shangshu Tai, as it was called in Chinese. And the role of this Imperial Secretariat and the Imperial Secretaries that worked within there was to handle, store, and pass edicts between the emperor and the court. So, aside from being an all knowing entity that gets to read all the reports coming from the courts and all the responses coming from the emperor, the Imperial Secretariat could also decide which reports even reach the emperor's hand, as one of their main tasks is to filter all court reports by importance, as the emperor's time is limited. This, of course, was a subjective decision, and one that was prone to being influenced through bribes or political favors, so the selection of imperial secretaries has always been a very important matter for the emperor and the state. Now, with Cao Fang being only 8 years old, this task fell on Cao Shuang and Sima Yi, who now share joint control of this very important imperial secretariat. But while this control was technically shared on paper, it did sway heavily in favor of Sima Yi in reality, as Sima Yi himself had been the chief imperial secretary under Cao Pi and still had numerous connections with existing senior imperial secretaries, such as Liu Fang and Sun Zi, who played such vital roles in securing Cao Shuang and Sima Yi as co-regents in the first place. So naturally, the control of the imperial secretariat and thus the control of the court became the first political battleground between Cao Shuang and Sima Yi. Initially, Cao Shuang played his role of being the junior co-regent, respecting Sima Yi's seniority and experience, as Cao Shuang would defer most of the court decisions to Sima Yi. But deep down inside, Cao Shuang wanted this power for himself, and very soon, Cao Shuang's close friend turned confidant and advisor, Ding Mi, would come up with a flawless political ploy to remove Sima Yi from the imperial secretariat entirely. And to find out what this plan was, come back next time as we'll take a look at how Cao Shuang slowly marginalized Sima Yi and eroded his powers at court in the early days of this ill-fated co-regency. So hopefully y'all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below or hit that like button, as your engagement keeps me motivated to make more contents like this. And as always, until next time, bye!